It all started, as these things often do, with a desire for a little peace and quiet, a bit more security in a world that felt increasingly intrusive. My name is Alex Henderson, and I'm what you might call a retired tinkerer. Spent most of my life as a robotics engineer, designing systems that needed to be precise, reliable, and, above all, secure. When my dear Martha passed a few years back, this house, the one we'd poured our hearts into in evergreen pines, became more than just bricks and mortar. It was a sanctuary, a repository of memories. Evergreen pines. Sounds idyllic, doesn't it? And for the most part, it was. Manicured lawns, quiet streets, a sense of community. But like any seemingly perfect pond, there was a current underneath, and that current often flowed directly from the homeowners association, or more specifically, from its self-appointed Grand Marshal, Brenda Miller. Brenda was a character. I tried to be charitable. Perhaps life hadn't dealt her the cards she felt she deserved. I'd heard whispers of a truncated career in middle management somewhere, a life that hadn't quite lived up to its own hype. So, she'd channeled all that thwarted ambition into the HOA, ruling our little enclave with an iron fist wrapped in a floral gardening glove. Her reign was one of petty decrees and meticulously enforced minutiae. The Great Lawn Gnome Edict of 22 was legendary, as was the ongoing saga of approved mailbox hues. I'd had my minor run-ins, of course. A polite but firm refusal to repaint my perfectly acceptable front door from forest green to the newly mandated, slightly darker forest green, until the existing paint actually needed redoing. A carefully worded letter explaining why her interpretation of the recycling bin placement guidelines was, with all due respect, geographically improbable. Each interaction was a little chess move, me trying to maintain my sanity and autonomy, her trying to assert dominance. The decision to upgrade my front door lock wasn't initially about Brenda, not directly anyway. It was more a confluence of things. A general uptick in neighborhood chatter about petty theft in adjacent communities, a couple of those vaguely unsettling, HOA inspection notice, we may need access, flyers slipped under doors that felt more like fishing expeditions than legitimate oversight. And, if I'm honest, the engineer in me just loves a good piece of precision hardware. I found this magnificent lock system, multi-point deadbolts, hardened steel, pick-resistant, bump-proof, the kind of thing that makes a locksmith sigh with grudging respect. I even customized part of the internal mechanism myself, a little signature touch. Installing it was a weekend project, deeply satisfying. Tightening those bolts, feeling the solid thunk as the deadbolts engaged, it was like fortifying not just my door, but my peace of mind. In a world where boundaries seemed increasingly blurred, that lock was a clear, unambiguous statement, this far, and no further. Little did I know how soon that statement would be tested, not by a common burglar, but by the Queen of Evergreen Pines herself. It was a Saturday morning, crisp and clear. I was in my workshop, a converted spare bedroom, tinkering with an old shortwave radio, lost in the scent of solder and the hum of vacuum tubes, the very picture of domestic tranquility. A peace about to be shattered by the unmistakable, unwelcome sound of someone messing with my new lock. It wasn't a knock. That's the first thing that registered, a discordant note in the quiet hum of my morning. No polite rap of knuckles, no cheery hello. Just a metallic scratching, a furtive, insistent jiggling at the front door. My first thought, naively, was maybe a delivery person fumbling with the wrong package at the wrong address, or perhaps a stray cat rubbing against the door. But the sound was too deliberate, too invasive. I muted the radio, my senses suddenly on high alert. I have a small, discreet security camera integrated into my smart home system, a relic of my professional paranoia, and I pulled up the feed on my tablet. And there she was. Brenda Miller. Her back was mostly to the camera, but that distinctive, slightly too bright pink tracksuit and the determined set of her shoulders were unmistakable. In her hand, she brandished a surprisingly large ring of keys, like a medieval jailer about to inspect the dungeons. She peered at my door, then selected a key and thrust it into the lock. It didn't turn. I saw her frown, a small, frustrated exhalation misting in the cool morning air. She tried another key. Same result. Her movements became more agitated. I could just make out her muttering, amplified slightly by the camera's microphone. This is supposed to be the master, always something with this unit. Mr. Henderson needs to learn about compliance, a master key. For my privately owned front door. The sheer, unmitigated gall of it sent a flash of anger through me, quickly followed by a strange sort of clinical curiosity. The engineer in me wanted to observe this flawed system, her system of entitled delusion, in operation. I crept towards the door, phone in hand, and peered through the peephole, pressing record on my phone's camera, carefully angling it to capture her efforts. Her face was now a mask of growing frustration. She huffed, she puffed, she rattled the doorknob with surprising force for a woman of her build. She even gave the door a little kick with her pristine white sneaker. It was quite the performance. The master key delusion was fascinating. I knew our HOA CC and RS cover to cover, a side effect of those previous minor skirmishes. There were provisions for access to common elements, for emergency repairs within walls with proper notice, but absolutely nothing granting the HOA, let alone its busybody president, the right to a master key for individual, privately owned dwellings. This wasn't just Brenda being officious, this was Brenda attempting to unlawfully enter my home. The initial annoyance was solidifying into a cold, hard knot of indignation. How far would she take this? I wondered. The answer, it turned out, was all the way to Crazy Town, next stop 911. Brenda Miller, her face now flushed a shade of crimson that clashed spectacularly with her pink tracksuit, finally seemed to give up on her mythical master key. For a moment, I thought she might actually resort to trying to shoulder barge the door, a mental image that was almost comical. But no, Brenda had another, more dramatic tool in her arsenal of perceived authority. She straightened up, took a step back from my impenetrable door, and with a flourish of theatrical indignation, whipped out her smartphone. I could hear her quite clearly through the solid oak. Her voice, usually a carefully modulated coo when she was trying to charm or a sharp bark when issuing decrees, now took on a tone of high drama, a bizarre blend of feigned panic and imperious command. Yes, 911. This is Brenda Miller, president of the Evergreen Pines Homeowners Association, she announced, making sure to emphasize her title as if it were a rank in the Secret Service. My eyebrows shot up. She wouldn't. Oh, she was. There's a critical situation at 12 Maple Lane, she continued, her voice rising in urgency. The resident, a Mr. Alex Henderson, is completely unresponsive, a blatant lie. I was very responsive, currently responding by silently recording her charade. I've been attempting to gain entry for an emergency welfare check, it's standard HOA procedure, you understand, and my master key isn't working. It's highly suspicious, deeply concerning. Standard procedure. Master key for a welfare check initiated by her. The woman was building a fantasy world brick by fictional brick. He could be injured in there, or worse, she declared, her voice now laden with manufactured dread. There might be unauthorized structural modifications affecting the building's integrity. We need immediate access, officers. This could be a major safety hazard. Unauthorized structural modifications. Building integrity. From a locked door. The sheer audacity of her escalating lies was breathtaking. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion, except the car was Brenda's sanity and the wall was my new lock. Yes, send officers immediately, she commanded. And please inform them that the HOA president requires their assistance to secure the premises and ensure resident safety. Her assumption of authority, not just over me, but over the police, was truly something to behold. My internal monologue was a whirlwind of outrage and disbelief. She was actually weaponizing the emergency services because her ego was bruised by a lock she couldn't bypass. The absurdity of it was almost too much. The gall of inventing a welfare check, a master key, structural integrity issues, it was a masterclass in manipulative fiction. I heard her disconnect the call. The silence that followed felt heavy, charged. My mind raced. Should I open the door now, confront her? No. Let this play out. Let her dig this hole as deep as she possibly could. I checked my phone, the recording was clear, capturing her every word, her every frustrated rattle. A grim sort of anticipation settled in. It wasn't long before the distant, then rapidly approaching, wail of sirens cut through the morning quiet. Brenda, I imagined, would be perking up, a smug, vindicated look no doubt spreading across her face. Little did she know, this was not going to go the way she planned. Not by a long shot. The universe, it seemed, had a very particular sense of irony in store for Ms. Brenda Miller. The patrol car, lights still subtly flashing, pulled up to the curb. Two officers emerged, their demeanor professional, if a little weary, probably already anticipating another neighborhood squabble. Brenda, however, transformed. She practically sprinted towards them, a one-woman welcoming committee of manufactured concern. I watched through the peephole as she launched into her performance, pointing dramatically at my door, her hands fluttering, her voice now a carefully calibrated blend of distress and officialdom. "Oh, thank heavens you're here, officers!" I heard her exclaim. "I've been so terribly worried. Mr. Henderson, the resident, he just won't answer, and the HOA master key won't work. It's never done that before." Her ability to lie with such conviction was almost an art form. Just then, as if on cue from a celestial scriptwriter with a penchant for dramatic irony, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I glanced at the screen. It was my son, David. My heart did a little jump. Perfect timing, or something more. "Dad." David's voice came through, a little tinny but clear. "It's David. Are you okay? What in the Sam Hill is going on at your place?" There was an undertone of urgency, and something else, amusement. "David. I'm fine, son. Perfectly fine. Why? What have you heard?" I kept my voice low, very aware of the officers and Brenda just outside. "Okay, good," he said, a note of relief in his voice. "Dad, this is seriously weird, and I'm technically on a quick coffee break, but I had to call you. Some woman, a Brenda Miller, from your HOA. She just called 911 about your address. And Dad." I took the call. The world seemed to slow for a moment. The pieces didn't just click into place, they slammed together with the force of a revelation. Brenda Miller, in her infinite entitlement, had dialed 911 and gotten my son. My son, David, the calm, methodical emergency dispatcher. "She was a real piece of work, Dad," David continued, his voice a mixture of professional assessment and filial exasperation. "Demanding, incredibly entitled, spinning this wild yarn about you being unresponsive, that her precious master key had failed, insisting the police needed to force entry. Her story had more holes than a block of Swiss cheese that had lost a fight with a machine gun. I logged it internally as caller exhibiting unusual demands, potential misuse of emergency services, but obviously, protocol is protocol. I had to dispatch officers based on the welfare check claim. Just be careful with her, Dad. She sounds completely unhinged." I let out a slow breath, a grin I couldn't suppress spreading across my face. "David, you have no idea," I murmured. "She's outside with the officers right now. Your timing is nothing short of incredible." "Thank you, son. This changes things quite a bit." "Yeah, I figured as much," he said. "The address, your name. I just had a gut feeling. And Dad." The entire call is recorded, standard procedure. Her exact words, every last one of them. A wave of relief washed over me, quickly followed by an immense surge of pride in David's professionalism and his quick thinking. And then, the truly delicious, exquisite irony of the situation began to sink in. The antagonist hadn't just made a fool of herself, she'd delivered a full, unedited confession of her manipulative tactics directly to a member of my own family, one who was duty-bound to document it officially. This was better than I could have possibly planned. A surge of confidence, cool and steady, filled me. It was time to open the door. Taking a deep, steadying breath, I smoothed down my shirt, composed my features into an expression of mild, polite inquiry, and opened the door. The sudden appearance of a perfectly calm, very much alive resident visibly startled Brenda. Her smug, "I told you so" expression faltered for a heartbeat, replaced by a flicker of, "Was that actual surprise?" Then, just as quickly, her authoritarian mask snapped back into place. "Mr. Henderson," she exclaimed, her voice a tad too loud, a tad too shrill. "So you are in there?" "Officers, you see." He was deliberately refusing to answer. I ignored her, turning my attention to the two police officers. "Good morning, officers," I said calmly. "Alex Henderson. I'm perfectly fine, as you can see. Just enjoying a quiet Saturday morning until this, rather theatrical disturbance." I made a subtle gesture towards Brenda, who was now puffing up like an indignant bulldog. Officer 1, the taller of the two, with a name tag reading Miller, no relation to Brenda, I sincerely hoped, addressed me. Sir, we received a call expressing concern for your welfare and stating an inability to access your unit due to a malfunctioning master key. Concern, officer? I replied, raising an eyebrow. Or perhaps an attempt to unlawfully enter my private residence. I heard Ms. Miller outside my door for a good 5 minutes, fiddling with my lock, muttering about some master key that I assure you does not, and legally cannot, exist for my front door. I recently upgraded my security for precisely this kind of overreach. Brenda, predictably, couldn't contain herself. It's HOA property, she interjected, voice quivering with indignation. We have a right to inspect for compliance. And I absolutely have a master key for emergencies. It's in the bylaws. I turned back to the officers, maintaining my calm demeanor. Actually, officers, this is my privately owned condominium unit. The HOA has no inherent right of random inspection without proper, legally mandated notice or a genuine, verifiable life-threatening emergency, neither of which applied here. And there's certainly no provision for the HOA president to possess a master key to my personal front door. What Ms. Miller was attempting, by any legal definition, is trespass. I have her entire performance at my door, including her claims about a master key. On video, I casually tapped the pocket where my phone rested. Then, I delivered the kicker, keeping my tone even, almost conversational. Interestingly, officers, the 911 dispatcher Ms. Miller spoke to just a few minutes ago to make her rather colorful report. That was my son, David. He called me, understandably quite concerned about the nature of her call and the numerous, shall we say, inaccuracies in her statement. The effect was instantaneous. Both officers visibly blinked. Officer Miller exchanged a quick, unreadable glance with his partner, Officer Chen. Brenda's jaw, which had been set in a belligerent line, seemed to slacken. Her face, already flushed, went a shade paler. She looked like she'd swallowed a particularly sour lemon. He can't, that's a conflict of interest, she sputtered, her voice losing its previous conviction. You're twisting things. This is harassment. Officer Miller, to his credit, remained impassive, though I thought I saw a flicker of something, amusement. Resignation in his eyes. Ma'am, he said, his voice calm but firm, let's just clarify a few things here. Mr. Henderson, while we're here, would you object to us just confirming your welfare, given a call was made? Ordinarily, I value my privacy quite highly, officer, I replied. But given Ms. Miller's demonstrably false report, and to show my full cooperation with you, yes, you may take a quick look. However, I added, fixing Brenda with a cool stare, Ms. Miller is not to cross my threshold. The game, as they say, had most definitely changed. The officers turned their attention more fully to Brenda, a subtle shift in their posture indicating she was now the focus of their inquiry, not me. Officer Miller, his notebook now out, asked, Ma'am, about this master key you mentioned, could you please explain its purpose and the authorization behind it? Brenda, who moments before had been a confident commander of imaginary HOA legions, now fumbled. It's for emergencies, of course. It's standard. It's in the bylaws somewhere. The HOA needs to be able to access units for safety. She waved a vague hand, as if the bylaws were magically inscribed on the air around us. She couldn't cite a single specific rule, her bluster rapidly deflating under the calm, professional scrutiny. Officers, I interjected smoothly, I happen to have a current copy of the Evergreen Pines HOA covenants, conditions, and restrictions, as well as the operative bylaws, right inside. I'd be more than happy to show you. I can assure you, there is absolutely no provision granting the HOA, or any individual board member, the authority to possess or use a master key for privately owned dwellings like mine. There are, naturally, clauses about access for common element repairs, typically requiring 24 to 48 hours written notice, or in proven, life-threatening emergencies that are usually verified by fire or police personnel first, not unilaterally declared by an HOA president with a key fetish. What Ms. Miller was attempting here, her claims of a master key notwithstanding, constitutes attempted trespass. I then gestured to my formidable front door. Furthermore, this is a specialized, high-security, multi-point locking system I installed myself. It's designed to be virtually unpickable and unbreachable by conventional means. Only I, and a very trusted locksmith who holds a spare in a sealed, bonded vault, possess keys to this specific lock. There is no master key in existence that could possibly open it, nor should there be for any private residence. Brenda's desperation was palpable now. Her face was a mottled patchwork of red and white. He's just being uncooperative. He's always been difficult. This is a security risk if the HOA can't get in during an emergency, she cried, her voice cracking. Officer Chen, who had been quietly observing, spoke up, addressing me. Sir, you mentioned you wouldn't object to us confirming your welfare. Would you mind if one of us just took a quick look inside to satisfy the requirements of the initial call? Just southwest we can officially close that part out. Ordinarily, Officer Chen, I would indeed object to warrantless entries, however brief, I said, maintaining a polite but firm tone. But given Ms. Miller's entirely fabricated emergency call, and to demonstrate my complete transparency and cooperation with legitimate law enforcement, yes, one of you may step inside for a brief visual confirmation. However, I reiterate, Ms. Miller is to remain outside my property line. I wanted it crystal clear that this was an allowance due to the extraordinary circumstances she had created, not a precedent. Officer Chen nodded, stepped just inside the doorway. I gestured around my tidy living room. As you can see, I am quite alone, perfectly well, and there are no signs of distress, nor any unauthorized structural modifications affecting building integrity, as Ms. Miller so dramatically claimed. It took all of 30 seconds. He stepped back out. Thank you, Mr. Henderson. Everything appears to be in order. Then, both officers turned to Brenda. The atmosphere had chilled considerably. Ma'am, Officer Miller began, his voice devoid of its earlier neutrality, it appears Mr. Henderson is, in fact, fine. We are also going to need to have a serious discussion about the appropriate use of the 911 emergency system. Claiming an emergency when one clearly does not exist is a significant misuse of public resources and a serious matter. Brenda's defiance seemed to visibly crumble. She sputtered, but I thought it was an emergency. His prolonged unresponsiveness. The key not working. Unresponsive to someone attempting to pick my lock with an unauthorized key, you mean? I inserted quietly, letting the question hang in the air. The officers were no longer looking at me with any suspicion. Their gaze was fixed firmly on a rapidly deflating Brenda Miller. Officer Chen was making more notes in his pad. The master key argument, Brenda's primary weapon, had not just been deflated, it had been utterly demolished. The foundation of her authority was sand, and the tide was going out. The police officers concluded their visit with a professionalism I appreciated. They issued a stern, unequivocal warning to Brenda regarding the misuse of the 911 system and strongly advised her against any further attempts to harass me or access my property without clear legal standing. They suggested that any future HOA concerns be routed through formal, documented channels or involve legal mediation, not unilateral actions based on her personal interpretation of non-existent powers. They took my contact information, confirmed they would be filing a detailed incident report, and departed, leaving Brenda standing alone on the sidewalk, looking rather small and deflated. Her earlier righteous fury had evaporated, replaced by a sullen, humiliated anger. She shot me one last venomous glare, muttered something incoherent about reporting me to the full board for blatant noncompliance and insubordination, empty, blustering threats now, and then turned on her heel and practically stomped back towards her own house, her pink tracksuit a retreating beacon of defeated entitlement. My first action, once the door was firmly shut and the magnificent deadbolts engaged with a satisfying thunk, was to meticulously save and back up all the video footage. The clear recording from my security camera capturing her attempts at the lock, her frustrated muttering about the master key, and then the crystal clear audio from my phone of her entire, ludicrous 911 call, it was all there, preserved on multiple drives. Then, I called David again. This time, the conversation was longer, more relaxed on my end, though David was still buzzing with a mixture of disbelief and professional indignation. Son, I said, a warmth spreading through me, you were absolutely incredible. Your calm handling of her on the call, your professionalism, and that heads up you gave me, it was a complete game changer. I can't thank you enough, he chuckled. Just doing my job, Dad. Though I admit, that was one for the books. When she said, Brenda Miller, HOA president, and then your address, I almost dropped my headset. So, what's the official record look like from your end? Oh yeah, it's all logged, David confirmed. Caller ID matched the name she gave. Her specific claims, master key failed, resident unresponsive, requesting forced entry for welfare check and possible structural issues. It's all there in the CAD notes, the computer-aided dispatch system. And like I said, the audio of the entire call is recorded and archived. My supervisor was already raising an eyebrow when I mentioned the caller's unusual aggression and the subsequent "all clear from your address" after I told him I'd made an off-duty check-in call to you because I knew the resident. Her call will definitely stand out if there's any review of 911 usage or if she tries to deny what she said. He explained that while he couldn't directly release the recording to me due to privacy protocols, it was an official record. It could be subpoenaed in a legal proceeding, or accessed by city officials or law enforcement if they decided to investigate Brenda for misuse of emergency services, a distinct possibility given the officer's stern warning. With that vital piece of information secured, I turned my attention to the HOA's governing documents. I spread the thick binder of CC and RS, the bylaws, and every amendment ever issued across my large dining room table. Armed with highlighters and a stack of sticky notes, I embarked on a deep dive, a forensic analysis of the rules that supposedly governed evergreen pines. I searched meticulously for any clause, any sentence, any turn of phrase that could even remotely, by the wildest stretch of imagination, be twisted to support Brenda Miller's claim of possessing or needing a master key to private dwellings. Nothing. Zero. Zilch. There were, as I already knew, clearly defined procedures for accessing units for maintenance of common elements, shared plumbing within walls, electrical conduits, structural components, but these all required written notice, typically 24 to 48 hours in advance, except in cases of visible and immediate emergencies like fire spewing from a window or water gushing from under a door, emergencies that would usually be reported by neighbors or detected by external sensors, not preemptively. Investigated by a key-wielding HOA president. Brenda's actions had no basis in our HOA's own rules, let alone in state or local law. My internal monologue was shifting. This was no longer just about Brenda and her personal power trip. This was about potential systemic HOA overreach. If the board knew about her master key and condoned it, or if this was some informal but accepted practice, then the HOA itself could be facing significant legal liability. The thought spurred me to my next action. I pulled up my email and started drafting a message to Sarah Collins, an old friend from my university days who was now a sharp, no-nonsense attorney. "Sarah," I typed, "you are not going to believe this one." Sarah Collins listened to my story, her expression shifting from polite interest to wide-eyed astonishment, punctuated by the occasional low whistle or a muttered, "You're kidding me." We were in her comfortable, book-lined office a few days later, the scent of old paper and brewing coffee filling the air. When I got to the part about David being the 911 dispatcher, she actually laughed out loud, a genuine, hearty laugh. "Alex," she said, leaning back in her chair once I'd finished, "this isn't just a good story, this is legal gold. You've got attempted trespass, clear and documented misuse of emergency services, almost certainly defamation with her false claims to the 911 operator and the responding police officers, and a strong case for ongoing harassment if this is part of a pattern. Brenda Miller is, to put it mildly, toast personally. And depending on their response, the HOA could also be significantly liable if they either sanction this master key nonsense or if they fail to act decisively now to rectify the situation and discipline her." Sarah advised a swift, two-pronged attack. First, a meticulously detailed and very strongly worded formal complaint to the entire HOA Board of Directors, CCING their management company and, crucially, their official legal counsel. Second, a formal cease and desist letter delivered directly to Brenda Miller, on Sarah's legal letterhead, making it clear that her actions had legal consequences and threatening a civil suit for damages and a restraining order if her harassment continued or if the HOA didn't take appropriate remedial action. Together, we drafted the complaint to the HOA. It was a masterpiece of cold, factual fury. We laid out the timeline of events with precision: Brenda's unauthorized attempt to access my home, her specific false statements made during the 911 call, carefully noting that the call was officially recorded and that, in an almost unbelievable twist of fate, the dispatcher was my own son who could attest to her demeanor and claims, the subsequent police response, and the absolute lack of any legitimate basis in the HOA governing documents for her actions or her mythical master key. We referenced specific HOA bylaws that Brenda had clearly violated, those pertaining to respect for private property, the outlined procedures for necessary unit access, and the code of conduct expected of board members. We explicitly stated, with page and section numbers where appropriate, the non-existence of any bylaw authorizing master keys for individual private dwellings or sanctioning the kind of unilateral, aggressive actions Brenda had taken. Our demands were clear and non-negotiable. 1. The immediate removal of Brenda Miller from the HOA presidency and any other board position she held. 2. A formal, public, written apology from the HOA board to me for the harassment and attempted unlawful entry. 3. A formal clarification issued by the board to all homeowners stating unequivocally that the HOA does not hold, nor does it authorize, master keys to private residences, and reiterating the correct, legal procedures for any necessary unit access. 4. Confirmation that any and all keys Brenda Miller might possess which she claimed were master keys for any private residence in Evergreen Pines be immediately collected and verifiably destroyed. We attached a damning still image from my security camera video, showing Brenda at my door, keys in hand, looking like a frustrated burglar. We also mentioned the existence of the full video recording, the police incident report number, and the potential for the official 911 call recording to be accessed. We gave them 7 business days to provide a substantive response. The cease and desist letter to Brenda was even more direct, outlining her unlawful actions and warning of impending legal action if she didn't immediately stop all forms of contact or harassment. Both were sent via certified mail, return receipt requested. The satisfying thud of the envelopes hitting the post office counter felt like the opening salvo in a battle I was now determined to win, not just for myself, but for the principle of the thing. The initial response from the HOA board, channeled through their perpetually flustered management company representative, was about as substantial as a soap bubble. A bland, form letter acknowledgement of receipt for my complaint. Then, a follow-up call a day later from a board member I barely knew, a nervous fellow named Arthur, who attempted a bit of gentle deflection. "Mr. Henderson," he began, his voice hesitant, "we've received your, concerns. We're certainly looking into the matter. You know, Ms. Miller is a very dedicated volunteer, very passionate about the community. Perhaps there was simply a misunderstanding." A misunderstanding? I almost laughed. Sarah, however, did not find it amusing. Her response, delivered via a crisp email back to Arthur, the entire board, and their legal counsel, was swift and sharp. Mr. Henderson's complaint details attempted unlawful entry and the filing of a false emergency report, not a misunderstanding. The evidence, including video footage and the official 911 call record where Ms. Miller's son acted as dispatcher, is unambiguous. We await your substantive response to our client's clearly articulated demands by the stated deadline of date. Failure to address these serious matters appropriately will leave Mr. Henderson with no alternative but to pursue all available legal remedies against both Ms. Miller personally and the Evergreen Pines HOA. The polite velvet glove was off, the legal iron fist was now clearly visible. That, it seemed, got their attention. The prospect of public embarrassment, particularly the uniquely damning detail of Brenda calling my son on 911, combined with the very real threat of a costly lawsuit, seemed to penetrate the board's usual inertia. I heard through neighborhood osmosis, the grapevine in Evergreen Pines was remarkably efficient, that Sarah's email had caused quite a stir. Brenda, upon receiving her own cease and desist letter from Sarah's firm, apparently went ballistic. There were reports of her storming into the management office, demanding to know who that Henderson troublemaker thought he was. She tried to rally her few remaining allies on the board, painting herself as the victim of a vindictive resident trying to undermine HOA authority. But the evidence was too compelling, too specific. The son as the dispatcher angle was a particular killer. It made her claims of a simple misunderstanding or a genuine emergency concern look utterly ridiculous and malicious. It was a detail so bizarrely specific it had the ring of undeniable, uncomfortable truth. The HOA board convened an emergency closed session. Brenda was, undoubtedly, summoned. I would have paid good money to be a fly on the wall in that meeting. I imagined Brenda, cornered and desperate, trying to bluster her way through, perhaps blaming me for having an unauthorized high-security lock, or accusing David of somehow misrepresenting her 911 call. But then I pictured the other board members, perhaps Arthur, now armed with copies of my complaint, Sarah's pointed letters, and the looming shadow of legal action, presenting her with the cold, hard facts. The police report. The summary of her ludicrous claims on the 911 call. The video still of her at my door. The slow, dawning realization on their faces that Brenda wasn't just eccentric or overzealous, she was a clear and present danger to the HOA's finances and reputation. Her master key crusade, born of ego and a thirst for control, had no basis in their own rules and had now exposed them all to serious legal jeopardy. The capitulation, when it came, was swift. Late on the afternoon of the deadline Sarah had set, her phone rang. It was the HOA's legal counsel. After a brief, pointed conversation, Sarah called me. "Alex," she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice, "I think we have a resolution." They had agreed to all our primary demands. Brenda Miller was to be immediately removed from her position as president and from the board entirely. They would issue the formal apology and the community-wide clarification about master keys. They would also conduct an internal review of key management, translation, find whatever random keys Brenda had hoarded and make sure they were for common areas only, or destroyed. Brenda, they informed Sarah, had apparently tendered her resignation for personal reasons, just hours before the board was scheduled to vote on her removal, a transparent attempt to save a sliver of face. But everyone, absolutely everyone, knew the real story. The sweet, undeniable taste of vindication was beginning to fill the air. The system, creaky and flawed as it often was, had finally, under pressure, begun to work. The official communication from the Evergreen Pines HOA arrived in every homeowner's mailbox a week later. It was a masterpiece of carefully worded corporate retreat. The letter, signed by the newly appointed interim board president, Arthur, looking rather overwhelmed in his new role, I imagined, began by acknowledging an unfortunate recent incident involving a misunderstanding regarding access protocols at a private residence. It went on to offer a sincere apology to Mr. Alex Henderson for any distress caused. Then came the crucial clarification. The board wishes to reassure all residents that the Evergreen Pines HOA does not possess, nor does it authorize its members or agents to possess, master keys for entry into privately owned dwellings. Access to private units for legitimate, documented common element maintenance will only occur with proper advance notification as stipulated in the CC&RS, or in cooperation with emergency services during a verified, immediate life-threatening situation. It concluded by announcing that Ms. Brenda Miller is no longer serving on the HOA board of directors, effective immediately. No mention of her resignation for personal reasons, just gone. The message, though couched in diplomatic language, was crystal clear to anyone who had been paying attention. Brenda's reign of terror was over. Brenda Miller was now just another resident. Stripped of her title, her perceived power, her ability to meddle and decree, she seemed to shrink. I'd see her occasionally, scuttling to her car or hastily retrieving her mail, always avoiding eye contact. The vibrant pink tracksuit seemed a little less bright, her posture a little less self-important. There was no gloating on my part, just a quiet satisfaction in seeing an overblown ego receive its necessary deflation. The neighborhood, meanwhile, seemed to breathe a collective sigh of relief. Several neighbors, people I'd only ever exchanged polite nods with, approached me in the following weeks, some openly, some more discreetly. "Thank you," one older gentleman said, shaking my hand warmly. She had it coming for years. "We were all just too intimidated, or too tired, to fight her," another neighbor, a young mother, confessed. "I almost painted my kid's swing set the wrong blue last year and she threatened me with daily fines." "You're a hero, Mr. Henderson." I wasn't a hero, just someone who'd finally had enough and, luckily, had a few unexpected advantages. Reflecting on it all, several lessons stood out. The absolute importance of knowing your rights, of actually reading those dense HOA documents that most people ignore until it's too late. The tangible value of good physical security. My high-tech lock wasn't just a deterrent, it was the rock upon which Brenda's ambitions had shattered. And then there was the sheer, beautiful serendipity of unexpected allies. David, my son, the calm voice of reason at the other end of Brenda's frantic 911 call, had been the linchpin. The universe truly does have a wickedly precise sense of humor, and sometimes, it aligns to serve up a dish of justice so perfectly ironic it's almost poetic. The quiet Saturday mornings in Evergreen Pines are truly quiet again. My magnificent lock remains, a silent, gleaming guardian on my front door. It's more than just a security device now, it's a symbol of a hard-won peace, a testament to the fact that even the most entrenched little tyrants can be toppled with a combination of facts, firmness, and sometimes, a sun in exactly the right place at exactly the right time. So, that's the story of how my fancy lock and a spectacularly ill-advised 911 call to my own kid brought down our neighborhood's HOA empress. It just goes to show you, sometimes the most improbable connections can lead to the most profoundly satisfying outcomes. Have you ever had an HOA saga that just screams to be told? Or a moment where karma delivered a punchline so perfect you couldn't have written it better yourself? I'd love to hear about it. And always remember, stand your ground, know your rights, and maybe, just maybe, double-check who's on the other end of the line before you try to burn someone's house down with a fabricated emergency. Metaphorically speaking, of course. Mostly.